What do poop, religion, trauma, and meat have in common? One man, one mind, one of the most important voices in indie gaming. His work is messy, brutal, brilliant, and deeply human. From browser Game Freak shows to some of the most popular games in all of the industry, this is a story of a man who turned personal pain into pixelated power. This is the rise of Edmund McMillen, the artist who made monsters feel like home. Before he became one of the most influential indie devs of all time, Edmund McMillen was just a kid in Santa Cruz, California, sketching monsters into the margins of his notebooks, and trying to make sense of a world that felt broken. Born in 1980, Edmund was raised in a strict Catholic household. Religion wasn't just a belief system, it was a shadow that loomed over everything. Sin, guilt, judgment, redemption. These weren't just Sunday sermons, they were the building blocks of his imagination.
I incorporate a lot of things that I thought were interesting that I was forbidden from messing with, like Ouija boards, tarot cards, runes.
While most kids were drawing superheroes, Edmund was sketching blood, guts, and demons. His family didn't get it, but it made sense to him. The horror, the grotesque. Art wasn't just a hobby, it was his escape.
I don't know. I really don't know what I enjoy the most about it. I enjoy that it makes me happy. That's it. Like, that's it. When I'm creating a game, even when I'm sitting around and just sketching something on paper that never sees the light of day, I feel like a person, and I feel happy.
His grandmother, however, was a strong supporter of his unconventional storytelling and creative pursuits. He gravitated towards comic books that blurred the lines between beauty and terror. He didn't just want to tell stories, he wanted them to bleed out onto the page. Edmund started by making comics between the ages of 15 and 18, but wasn't able to continue. Unfortunately, there just was no money in comics. After receiving a rejection letter from a comic publishing company, McMillen would take his comics online, learning some HTML to build his own website. He uploaded his comics, his art, his thoughts, anything that felt real. And slowly, people started finding him, commenting, emailing, reacting. For the first time, he could feel the connection he'd been missing. But it wasn't just about showing people art anymore. Edmund wanted them to interact with it, to touch it, to feel the discomfort. That's when he discovered Flash, the tool that would become his new canvas. No more static panels, now his drawings could move, scream, bleed, and die. Edmund began working with programmers, people that could breathe life into his twisted characters. And just like that, comics gave way to code, storytelling became interaction, and the monsters in his head started to crawl out onto the screen.
Well, I don't think I knew what I wanted to achieve outside of experimentation and simply putting a piece of me out there.
In 2001 and 2002, Edmund would explode out of the gates, releasing 15 works on his website, This Is a Cry for Help. In 2003, Edmund would work with Calder Bradford to release Carious Welting, a grotesque little shooter starring a floating, bleeding head that fired projectiles from its own body.
I'm kind of a fan of this. It's really weird, but really interesting.
It was weird, it was raw, and it was very Edmund. He wasn't working with big budgets or studios, just his art, his ideas, and online platforms like Newgrounds. Digital playgrounds where weirdness wasn't just accepted, it thrived. Over the next couple years, he would continue to work on projects, and each new game was a different wound opened up on screen. In 2004, he would have an opportunity to work his first major commercial release, Gish, in hopes that he would start to be taken seriously in the indie scene. It was a strange, squishy platformer about a 12-pound ball of living tar, on a mission to save his girlfriend from the sewers of underground hell. The game was a physics-driven platformer years ahead of its time, blending traditional 2D platforming with tactical fluid-based movement. The tarball could stick, slide, and slam with full control over his gooey little body. Sound familiar? The game was built by Edmund and programmer Alex Austin. Together, they formed Cryptic Sea. Edmund did all the art and character design while Alex handled the coding. The result was a hit. It won Best Independent Game at the 2005 Independent Games Festival. Suddenly, Edmund wasn't just the guy from Newgrounds making creepy Flash games. He was a legit developer. After Gish, he went back to what he knew best, the strange, symbolic, and deeply personal games. Games that felt like dreams or nightmares, ones that only Edmund could make. But without that little ball of tar, none of it would have been possible.
And it made it into the IGF and eventually won the grand prize, which was basically the beginning of my career.
From 2004 to 2008, we'd continue to see Edmund perfect his craft, releasing games like Triachnid, another physics-based spider survival game. Eerie, quiet, almost sad. And Coil, abstract, haunting, and deeply symbolic. There were no instructions, just instinct. A game that would be nominated for the Innovation Award at 2009 Independent Games Festival. For Edmund, these weren't just games. They were expressions of his soul. His audience didn't always understand games, but they sure felt it. With every upload, Edmund was building a following. Not just fans, believers. People who connected with the sadness, the strangeness, and the sincerity. In 2008, Edmund released Flash Meat Boy, where he would lay the foundation for one of the greatest platformers of all time. It was raw, fast, and punishing. A throwback to the games Edmund grew up on. Meat Boy was a red, skinless cube of flesh. His mission was to save his girlfriend from a fetus in a jar wearing a top hat. Pure chaos, pure Edmund. The Flash game caught fire on Newgrounds. It wasn't just the tight controls or the brutal difficulty, it was the attitude. Players loved dying. Over and over and over. But Edmund wasn't done, not even close. Shortly after the success of Flash Meat Boy, Edmund partnered with programmer Tommy Raffines. Together, they set out to create a full-fledged version of the game. Not just a port, a complete reinvention. Super Meat Boy was built from the ground up. Over 300 levels, a full physics system, hand-drawn cutscenes, a soundtrack that slapped so hard Chris Rock got jealous. This wasn't just an indie game. This was a war cry. Released in 2010 on Xbox Live Arcade, Super Meat Boy hit the ground sprinting. Tight controls, instant restarts, no load times, every death felt fair, and every success released a flood of dopamine. Super Meat Boy wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. Critics loved it, players obsessed over it, speedrunners made it a lifestyle. But behind the scenes, the success came at a cost. The long nights, the crunch, the pressure, it pushed both Edmund and Tommy to the edge.
And it ended up taking 2, and I ended up having emergency gallbladder surgery and going $40,000 into debt. And it was just a nightmare ride. Every bad thing that could possibly happen did happen. A lot of stuff we can't even talk about due to NDA stuff, but it was a rough roller coaster ride.
Their story would become immortalized in Indie Game the Movie, showing just how brutal and beautiful the indie grind could be. With Super Meat Boy, Edmund didn't just prove himself, he carved his name into the spine of indie game history. After Super Meat Boy, Edmund had every reason to celebrate, but instead of coasting on his success, he went darker. Way darker. The next game, which you probably haven't heard of, was called The Binding of Isaac, which would release in 2011. The Binding of Isaac wasn't just a game, it was a purge. A deeply personal roguelike that ripped open themes of religion, guilt, and childhood trauma. Inspired by his own complicated relationship with religion, Edmund poured everything into it.
That is as honest as I can make it to who I am as a person. I'm going to talk about, my personal life. I'm going to talk about religious themes and all this other stuff.
Working with programmer Florian Himsel, the two built a twisted, randomly generated world where death was permanent and every run felt like a descent into something sacred and disgusting. Isaac wasn't supposed to blow up. It was made in just a few months, but something about it stuck. Players just kept coming back over and over. For the morbidness, the challenge, that moment when the player created the perfect brimstone synergy. In 2012, we get an expansion for Isaac, where Wrath of the Lamb would release, and we'd also get some insight into Edmund's story. Not through the game, but through a film.
If you can't get the work done, then the past 2 years are basically worth nothing. No pressure.
Indie Game the Movie premiered in 2012 and changed everything. It pulled back the curtain on what it really took to make a game like Super Meat Boy. The stress, the deadlines, the self-doubt, the sacrifice. For many, it was the first time they saw game developers as artists. And to Edmund, he became a symbol, a face, a quiet hero in the rise of indie games. Suddenly, he wasn't just a developer. He was recognized. People connected with him, not just through his games, but through his vulnerability. But even as the spotlight grew, Edmund stayed focused on what mattered most, creating strange, honest worlds that only he could make. If you made it this far in the video, leave a comment down below and enter your comment with your favorite indie game. That way I know you got this far. Shortly after, the Basement Collection, released in 2012, was a curated anthology of Edmund's earliest and most personal Flash games. Remastered, preserved, and bundled like a time capsule of trauma and creativity. With the Basement Collection, fans could relive the foundation of their favorite games. Each one was like peering into the past and seeing the tools that Edmund acquired over the years. He was showing where it all came from. The fears, the fascinations, the fingerprints. In 2014, The Binding of Isaac Rebirth launched, a total remake of the original Flash game. It was faster, deeper, and grotesquely beautiful. beautiful. With the help of developer Nicholas, it had a brand new engine and it expanded everything. Over 500 items, dozens of characters, new bosses, endings, and secrets layered like onions. It wasn't just a remake, it became a living game that grew with its community. Isaac was on its way to evolving in one of the most beloved roguelikes of all time. In 2015, Edmund would work with James Id to release Fingered, a game about locating a criminal through their physical attributes. It was a fun little game that gave Edmund a break from Isaac content. The next Isaac expansion, called Afterbirth, was released in the same year. It added new modes, monsters, and madness. Then in 2017, Afterbirth Plus would release, a massive toolkit for chaos. Mod support opened the floodgates, and the community would now be able to build off of Edmund's creations. Afterbirth Plus wasn't just more Isaac, it was an invitation. Edmund gave the keys to the fans and said, "Go break this game." And they did. In 2017, Edmund released The End Is Nigh, a return to platforming, but this time with death at the center. The End Is Nigh was Meat Boy's existential cousin. Same precision, same brutality, but with the weight of finality. In an interview, Edmund would talk about the game, stating, "There were a lot of subtle elements in my past platformers that I never fully explored because I was worried about alienating the audience. I wanted to make a game that was honestly a bit uncomfortable to play for people who have issues with stress." It was a reflection of where Edmund was at, creatively, emotionally, wrestling with the questions of legacy, endings, and what gets left behind. If Super Meat Boy was about control, The End Is Nigh was about accepting the lack of it. Somewhere between the monsters, mazes, and mayhem, Edmund changed.
And when it came to that carrying the weight, workload, workaholic personality type that I am, The End Is Nigh was the last game that felt like that. And, you know, and I could say that it probably at the time damaged my relationship. It's one of those juggling acts.
He became a father, slowed down, reflected more. The games never stopped coming, but behind the scenes, Edmund was figuring out how to balance creation with living. There were struggles, burnout, pressure, internet noise, but there was also healing. In his words, it became more about why he made the games, not just how. In 2019, The Legend of Bumbo released. It was a churn-based prequel to Isaac. It was weird and risky, but close fans of Isaac received the game with open arms. In 2020, Edmund would switch from video games to physical games. He'd release the card game Tapeworm. It was a tile-laying card game in which players competed to build tapeworms. The release did well, but his next release would give the fans exactly what they were looking for. And then in 2021, the latest update for Isaac would release, Repentance. It was more than just an expansion, it was a rebirth of a rebirth. Built in collaboration with the fan mod Antibirth, it added hundreds of hours of content and pushed Isaac to its breaking point. Repentance was everything Isaac ever was, horrifying, hilarious, heartbreaking. A chaotic masterpiece. So, what is McMillen doing these days? Cats. So many cats. After a decade in limbo, his long-lost fever dream Eugenics is back. A tactical RPG about mutant cats. It's weird, ambitious, and of course, it's very Edmund. It's a strategy game stitched together from 1,000 strange ideas, years of dev time, and the same creative itch Edmund's had since he was 15. The itch to make something no one else would dare to. And beyond Eugenics, who knows? Edmund's not a brand, not a sequel machine. He's an artist still chasing that creative spark, drawing monsters and making meaning out of madness. Whatever's after Eugenics, it's gonna be weird and it's gonna be worth it. So, let's discuss Edmund's impact. To stand out from other devs, Edmund would make games throughout his career that felt like confessions. He didn't chase polish, he chased emotion. His work was raw, personal, sometimes uncomfortable. While other devs were perfecting systems, Edmund was unpacking trauma through boss fights and bloodstains, and somehow that honesty connected. He was one of the founding fathers of indie gaming. Alongside a handful of other pioneers, he proved that one person with a vision could shake the industry. Super Meat Boy and The Binding of Isaac showed that indie games didn't need to be AAA studio to make a great game. They could be genuine and personal. Throughout his games, Edmund never held the player's hand. His stories were buried in mechanics, hidden in grotesque designs and subtle symbolism. He trusted the player to feel what he felt, whether or not they fully understood it. And the ambiguity? That's what made it powerful. Edmund never set out to become an icon. He just wanted to make weird little games that told the truth, even when it hurt. But over the years, he became something more. A symbol for creative honesty. He helped found the golden age of indie games, and prove that the strangest, most broken ideas can find someone who needs them. His games didn't chase trends, they made them. They spoke to failure, addiction, religion, childhood, love, and fear, all through poop jokes and pixelated tears. And through it all, Edmund stayed vulnerable. Not perfect, not polished, but honest. That's what made the monsters feel human.
Like, I know that there is a kid out there who stayed up all night long for the game to come out and then didn't go to school the next day because he was so into playing it. And that even far exceeds my experiences when I was younger. And to think that I could make something that could have an impact on this kid even creatively, into thinking, hey, I know 2 guys made this. Like, maybe I can make something too.
That's me. I am that kid. I was the kid who would stay up all night to play Isaac, or share Super Meat Boy with my friends, and I think that's a big reason I made this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, guys.